So we were talking about Dada in Berlin, right? We're tracing now the international phase of Dada after its origin in the two neutral countries, New York and Switzerland. It then becomes international after World War I is over, after 1919, 1919. And Berlin becomes a major center at exactly the same time as New Objectivity, right? Neue Sachlichkeit that we talked about. And it sucked up all of those artists because they're all kind of pissed off at the world, right? They're all angry at society. They're sort of maddened by the war. The war revealed the worst of us. And so George Grosz, right, got wrapped up into Dada. Less so Beckmann and Dix, right? Grosz becomes a huge part of it, okay? And the other thing that we see happening in Berlin is that in addition to sort of absorbing these expressionist artists with similar agendas, it also becomes the place where we see collage and photo montage, right? So hoax is quite literally a collage in that they are clippings pasted together, most of them photographs. But a photo montage, remember, does that and then exposes it and reproduces it like a photograph. And that's what George Grosz's is, okay? So there's a bit of a difference between collage and photo montage. So both of these artists are working in Berlin. They're both part of the Dada movement in Berlin in the early part of the 20s. At the very end of class, we were looking at some of the details here. Dadaisten, Dadaists in German. The great world of Dada, die große Welt Dada above. And then we saw that this little two-headed ballerina that she includes here, just there, is the two heads are one of them is George Grosz, right? So it's this sort of snarky commentary, if you will, this sort of humorous takedown of everything. Like she's not just pointing her criticism at politics, but rather at all elements of culture, right? The other head on the two-headed ballerina is this artist, John Hartfield, who also changed his name from Johann Herzfeld to John Hartfield in protest against the war. And he too is working now much more closely in photo montage, right? Where he takes photos and he manipulates them with other sorts of cutouts, re-exposes them, and uses them as political statements. And the Dada group is incredibly political in the 20s and into the early 30s, especially because at first, when we looked at the expressionists, we talked about the fact that their ire, their anger, was directed at this really fat society, right? The beer belly cultural epoch of Germany, the Weimar Republic, right? And its excesses and the polarization of wealth and how the fat cats are getting fatter and the people who suffered for the country have been neglected, right? The veterans. And that was the primary focus of sort of Dada anger. Well, by the middle and the end of the 30s, and again, this has come up, politics in Germany changes. The Weimar Republic was very, very lefty. It was very socially progressive in a lot of ways, right? But very, very wealthy as well. And by around 1925 onward, the far right started winning elections all over Germany. The Nazi Party rises to power, right? And they rise to power through elections. No radical takeovers, right? They rise to power through elections. And as the country as a whole begins to shift in that direction, what we find is that the Dada artists, while they're still sort of targeting society as a whole, they begin to focus now on Nazi issues, right? And the rightward shift of the country into this radical right, right? So in this case, the idea that if you're going to read official papers, the bourgeois papers, if you're going to read official papers, all you're going to do is make yourself deaf and dumb. Because the official papers at that point were controlled by the government. And that's the problem, is all you're reading is what the government wants you to think. And to do simply that, to only read what the government wants you to think, is basically to become deaf and blind. So what he's done is he's taken this collage and made it look as if this photograph has his face wrapped in paper. But again, it's all done through photographic manipulation. It's not like he wrapped somebody's face in paper and took a photo, right? It's all done through collaging and then photographing and exposing that collage, which is pretty tricky in itself. But again, this is a hallmark of Berlin Dada, is photo manipulation, right? Whether through collage or through photo montage. They are the experts at it. They're not the only ones doing it, but they're really good at it, right? I mean, the Soviets are doing it too, the constructivists are also doing something very, very similar. Adolf der Übermensch, Adolf the Superman, eats money. his esophagus, right? We see him in X-ray. And again, through photo montage, we see that his heart is the Nazi cross. We see that his esophagus is a line of gold coins, and his stomach is this big pot of gold, right? Pointed political comments. And what Hartfield would do was, after exposing these, because once you get the photographic plate, like with printmaking, you can run them off. And he was just running around town and sticking them up on telephone poles, on the sides of buildings. He was putting them everywhere throughout Berlin, right? This was an overtly political statement. They were not intended as high art, protest works, right? To show how rotten the country was becoming under Hitler. This landed Hartfield, I kid you not, number 5 on the SS Most Wanted list. The Nazi Most Wanted list, he was number 5, right? Because they were so upset at how he was shifting public opinion through the use of imagery plastered around the city, right? They came to get him in 1933, and he jumped out of he crashed, that sounds like something of an adventure film, right? He's on the first floor, so it's only about 10 feet off the ground. But he dives out the window and runs off into the night as they storm his apartment, right? Ends up moving, I think, first to Amsterdam, and then from there he moves to New York, or maybe London on the interim, right? But it sounds like something you read, you'd sort of see in an adventure movie of some sort, that he escapes at the very, very last minute, right? I think he even broke his leg doing it, right, as he leapt out of his window to avoid being captured by the Nazis. They came that close to getting him. So again, art as a political statement is very, very strong, particularly in Berlin, right, which is the capital. And Hartfield using this typically Berlin Dada thing, which is photo montage.
What is
Yeah.
the title name?
Adolf the Superman, Übermensch. And what's interesting, Elaine, about the title, I didn't say this, but now that you've mentioned it. Right, so Adolf, der is the in German, and Über, above, Mensch, man, Superman.
I wonder if it has something to do with Uber now.
Sorry, oh, the Uber. Yeah, because it takes you over, right? Uber goes from one side to the other. Uber, you're going to go from here to there, over the roads, over the rivers and through the woods, right? Now, Übermensch, though, Elaine, and this is what I want to mention, is that is that not the same word? Is that Übermensch is the word that Nietzsche used in talking the words? Remember when we talked about De Bruyne and how Nietzsche had this philosophy that we're not done evolving yet, that we will evolve to a race of supermen? It was the Übermensch was where we're headed, right? That's the next step of evolution. And so Hartfield is making a sort of a double comment here, right? He's saying that, well, this is where, fine, Hitler buys this stuff. This is where it leads to greed, right? In his Nazi heart. Just the taking of money and the producing of nothing except for hot air, right? The mouth that's not even saying anything. It's just blah, right? He's going to spew out his hatred and take in the money, right? That's what the Übermensch became in Hitler's hands.
And that's a photo montage.
That's also a photo montage, exactly right. So he took different, again, what he did was he took different pictures together, took a photograph of them, right, and then in the darkroom was able to get rid of the edges. So if you were to see a version of this, go to the Library of Congress and ask to see this, you wouldn't find, like you would in a collage, you wouldn't find edges. Does that make sense? You wouldn't be able to run your finger along it and find the edge of one thing glued on top of the other. Because that original thing is gone, right? And I don't even know to a certain degree, there's a couple of different ways you can make a photo of montage, right? One is you can glue this stuff together and take a photograph of it, right? And then when you get to the dark room, you're going to expose the plate with this photo that you've taken, and you can come back in and you can feather and dodge the edges so it's smooth. Number two is that what you can do is take a piece of photographic plate and expose the different things directly onto it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think that in there though.
Well, I don't know, right? I don't do darkroom techniques,
No,
but
the X-ray looks original, but
it does. But it's not an original Hitler X-ray. I don't think the body and the face go together. I don't know. I don't know, right? I don't know if that X-ray goes with that body, even really. And definitely the coins don't go with it. And you'll notice that he's come back over and laid the strap, right, across the outside of the X-ray as well, which would be, if it was a real X-ray of that body, wouldn't be there. And then the face has a slightly different tone. Right?
Yeah.
My guess is that the body and the head might have been similar, and then we superimposed the X-ray on top of it. You also notice that in addition to the Nazi cross, you also have an old Maltese cross. The World War I military medal. It's the just like 5 o'clock off of the Nazi cross. Right? Is the old World War I military medal there as well. So process that. I guess if you're doing a research paper on this, you would tell me. Right? Yeah. Because I really am not 100% sure exactly how he eventually comes to this, right? At the final thing, but it is definitely photo montage rather than collage. Right? Okay, two more Dada artists to look at. Remember, Dada's international, so it's everywhere. It's in multiple cities, and we'll talk about Dada Paris probably not until next week. Wait, what's today? Today's Tuesday.
Yeah.
Not until Friday. I really needed that October break, man. Every day seems like Friday. Okay, in the city of Hanover, another German capital, there was also a Dada outpost. And there was really only one artist at Dada Hanover, and it was Kurt Schwitters. And he even said later that I kind of adopted the title of Dada, but I was just kind of doing my own thing. Right? But we still lump him with the Dadaists. And he did works, various kinds of works. He did smaller things that were called sketches, that were also collages like this, and larger works. And the larger works are really interesting in that, one, there's not that many of them, and so we're really lucky to have one here at the Phillips. And two, the titles all suggest celestial bodies. They all sort of suggest, what do you want to say, things that evoke the supernatural world but are in the natural world. Does that make sense? So radiating world, a world that sort of radiates outward. The idea of makes you think of orbs in space, right? So he sees the works as having some sort of quasi-spiritual theme. But really the bottom line is that they're meant as social critique as well. And what he's done is he's taken a bunch of found objects, things he's picked up on the street, and he's collaged them together and then come over the top with paint and with stencil. But the things that he's collaging, as opposed to, say, Hannah Hoch in Berlin, are not photographs, right? They're just bits and pieces of stuff that he's found, right? And I've got some nice details of this, right? Where we can see the Dada movement in French stenciled over the top, and you can see where he's come back over the top of these things and painted and drawn. And so he's got a couple of stamps, right? Now, if we think about stamps, right, we tend not to think about it this way, but they really are legal tender, right? Stamps are money, right? They have an official value set by the government, that value printed on a piece of paper. That's exactly what paper money's like, right? Paper money is only worth what it says it's worth because the government agrees it's worth this, right? A dollar bill is not worth $1 in materials, right? Otherwise, what, a $100 bill would be 100 times as big, right? Or as heavy or whatever. It's worth that because the government says it's worth that. So it's legal tender. And the stamps are the same thing. I mean, I think that if you pushed it legally, you could go back to the post office give them stamps, and they'd have to give you the money back for what's printed on the stamp. Anymore, right, with the forever stamp, you probably can't anymore. But the ones that used to say 34 cents, right? Legal tender. So in this case, and this points to something with Kurt Schwitters, he's interested in things that relate to commerce, to capitalism, right? To the free market exchange. And the stamps have to be looked at as part of that. They are a reference to something that is bought and sold that has a capital value. Okay? And this is why he calls it a Märzbild. Bild is image in German. Right? Bilder is images in German. A bild is an image. Okay? And an image in every sense, whether it's an icon on your desktop or a painting like this, or the Mona Lisa. That's a bild, right? A medieval statue is a bild as well, right? It's an image, not necessarily even a painting, right? It can be an object. Sorry?
Start out with representation.
Icon, image. Image is probably the best, right? Because we would use image for a sculpture as well, right? Okay. Now, Merz is nonsense. Merz is a word he made up. But he derives it from the German word Kommerz, K-O-M-M-E-R-Z, Kommerz, which is a German word for commerce. Right? So this is a Märzbild, right? It's an image about commerce. It's an image about capitalism. Okay? And I don't mean that in a critical way, just capitalism as a system of finance. A system of management, right? A Märzbild, right? And he calls them all this. And in fact, he calls the process of finding these scraps, putting them together, collaging them, right? Scraps that usually refer to transactions. He calls it Märzing, right? Märzung in German. That's what he's doing. He's not collaging, he's Märzing, right? So the title of these things directly signals us as to how to interpret them. Right? Let me just show you a couple of details and then we'll quit. It's almost 1:45 now. I said I was going to get through 16 slides. I got through 5. There's number 6, right? And you can see that what he's doing is, so this is that bit where you can see the big word date. There are bits of newspaper there as well, but there are handwritten receipts. That's the top of a champagne bottle. The foil that goes over the top of the champagne bottle, been tacked down. Again, all about commercial transactions everywhere we look. But then painted in this, I love Schwitters. I wish I could make one of these. I just think he's got an eye for composition. And again, if we're going to make our little flow chart about how modernism works out, we can sort of begin to say, oh, there's constructivism here, definitely some cubism here, especially synthetic cubism, right? All of that stuff is coming together here within Schwitters' works, but he has an amazing eye for overall composition and how to bring these things together and how to make them enlivened in the sort of constructivist way, right? With all of these angles that we see, and they become sort of fascinating. I'd be even more fascinated if my German was any good, right? If I could read German, I'd love to get in and find out exactly what there is. But there's a train ticket, the 8:25 Berlin-Friedenauer train ticket. The stuff that he's finding are things that relate to transactions that define modern life. And what Schwitters wants to do is to sort of deconstruct that and say, hey, maybe within all of this, there's something greater, right? A radiating world. So the title suggests that there's more to life, there's more to our experience than just these commercial transactions, right? So this is him. Now, what makes it Dada, and then we'll quit. What makes this thing Dada? Randomness of found objects that are juxtaposed and thus dilute or transform their original meaning. Right? That's very Dada. Manipulating found objects. That's Duchamp, ready-made, right? And always manipulating. L-H-O-O-Q, right? Very, very Dada in its ideas. Not as random as Hans art, right? Not maybe slightly almost as meticulous as a Duchamp. Right? fits into these overall Dada ideas. Now, if he seems a little bit out there, a little bit different, that's because Squitters himself would say, yeah, you know, I just used it as a title, which is kind of a Dada thing to say. Right? Okay, it's 1:45, so we'll pick up. I promise we'll wrap up Dada on Friday and move on to Surrealism, which should set us up nicely for moving into American art.